So I have a son. I don't know if you guys know that. I've only talked about him a ton. But he's 3 months old. His name is Noah. I was actually going to start this morning with him up here on stage, but I'm not going to be talking about him the whole time. And so because it's distracting to have a kid up here and you guys pay attention to him more than you pay attention to me, I get jealous. That doesn't work. I didn't have him with me. But here's what I want to say. He's not bringing much to the table. Dude's 3 months old. He's costing me more time, more energy, more money, more focus, more sleep than he's bringing. Like, he literally is contributing nothing but the occasional smile that's quickly disappearing and hard to get a picture of. Like, at this point in the game, he's made no contribution to our family. And so Kim and I have been trying to decide, what do we do with that? You know, how do we love someone that brings nothing to the table? How do we care for someone that just seems to be more burden-esque than blessing-esque? How do we like see him as a blessing instead of seeing him as a burden? See, because what we've decided is that we're just going to approach him as a blessing, not a burden. I don't ever want my son to feel like he's a burden. Ever. Because I chose to bring him into the world. Like, he didn't choose me, I chose him. And so Kim and I just had the conversation of like, we got to get real about this. Like, is he inconvenient at times? Absolutely. Are we going to put that on him? Never. Because for us, we chose to have a child, and he's been nothing but a blessing and a big cost. And I think we like approach it, and we walk in at times just asking questions and feeling frustrated and like stressed out because of the lack of sleep or the lack of energy or the lack of focus. But we were away from him from a couple days this week and got home, and it was just nice to be able to hold him. And he cries and I smile. And he smiles and I smile better. But he's been a really big blessing. But I want you to know something about him. My prayer for him is this: that he would love God and love people. I don't care about anything else. Well, what about what grades he gets? Doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care if he goes to college. I don't care if he graduates high school. I don't care if he spends his entire life in jail. You know why? Because if he loves God and loves people, I'm good with that. Now, I care about those things, and I want what's best for him, but where he spends his life, in prison or in the Pentagon, I'm proud of him either way. And I want a relationship with him either way because he's my son. So my prayer for him is that he loves God and loves people. My prayer for me as his father is that I'm just around to see the moments. That I'm around to be a part of the big moments in life. That we would have enough of a relationship. That I would get out of the way enough, that I would be engaged with him enough, that when those moments happen in life, that I'm somebody that he wants to celebrate them with. Or that I'm somebody he wants to go through them with. Because to me and to Kim, in our parenting, intimacy with our child is far more important than our child's performance. And I think if I ask any parent in the room, does it matter to you more that you are close to your kid or that your kid gets good grades? Like, I think, especially in front of everybody else, that we'd be like, oh, it matters to me that we're close. But man, we don't always live that way. And it's this idea that, like, for me, I want to be close to my son more than I want to see him do well. It's not like, oh, Noah, when you can walk and run more, dude, like, I'm going to love you more. I'm gonna want to be closer to you. Like, when you can play sports better than I can, like, I'll be more proud of you. When you get more A's than I did, or when you get to a math beyond what I understand, then I'm gonna give you that check mark and tell you, you've gotten there. I love you. But until then, it's just not good enough. Like, I wouldn't live like that. I don't think you would live like that. I think it would bother you. There's people who are scowling at me right now, like, what the heck are you talking about? Your son should not be treated like he's a burden. He needs to always be a blessing. And we get that idea, like, in the idea of parenting, but I don't think we always get that idea in our idea of our relationship with Jesus. Because we walk into like this idea of faith, and we walk in with this big thing of like, I need to perform well. I need to have my crap together. There's literally people. Maybe you're sitting here. Maybe you're checked in on Facebook. Maybe they're not here at all and they're going to hear the podcast in a couple months and they go, I haven't been going to church because I don't have enough of my life together. And when I get more of my life together, then I'll go see Jesus. When I can perform better, then he'll accept me more. 1 John 3 says, what love the Father has lavished on us that we would be called children of God. Like that mentality goes right in the face of what God says about us. And like an element, like we're on Inked, we're on week 6 like of the series. We're wrapping it up this morning, and it's our anniversary service, and we're celebrating some things. And our mentality for the past couple of years, like, yeah, you can clap, I don't really care. At the end of 2 years, here's what I want you to know. This is a place where you can belong before you believe. I don't care about your performance. Clap offbeat, but if you do, just clap softly. Like, we've had guys who have been hungover, thrown up in the parking lot, and then come into church. We've had homeless guys who slept out on a bench in rainy weather and didn't get much sleep at all, sit right there and sleep the entire service, and I was blessed by it, not upset with them. We've had people walk in off the street knowing nothing about Jesus, see the gospel presented as somebody else made a decision for Christ, and get baptized, and we celebrate the heck out of it. Not because they're perfect, and not because they perform well, but simply because this is a place that they can belong before they have it all together. And so if you're here this morning and you just need to hear that this is a place where you can belong regardless of how you feel, I want you to know that. We want that for you. But this morning's message is not going to be about belong before you believe. That's the principle I want you to get. But this morning's message is going to be the why behind that. And it starts with Jesus. And I'm only going to give you one verse. John 15:5, Jesus says this, I'm the vine and you are the branches. Now let me be clear about who he's talking to. So a lot of us know the stories of Jesus. A lot of us have heard different things. We've seen the picture of the Last Supper. Jesus has just had the Last Supper. He's in the upper room, which is a room in Jerusalem. It was in somebody's house. He has dinner with his guys, his disciples, his closest followers, the people he's been spending the majority of his time with over the past 3 years. He has dinner with them. They break bread together, they share some wine, they have a good time, and when they leave there, we know that they eventually wind up in the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus gets arrested. But before that happens, some of the Gospels tell us that they spent some other time together as well. Now, I've been there. I've been to the upper room. I've sat where Jesus had his meal with people. We're confident of that. But we walked out of the upper room and we walked up onto the rooftop of another building that's right next door. And I think the disciples would have walked up there with Jesus. They would have spent some time with him. And just like every other house and rooftop of that day, they would have seen a small vineyard. Because all over Jerusalem, if you have the opportunity to get there and you have the opportunity to get up on rooftops, even if you just get up on the upper room rooftop, you can see most of the city and you can see other rooftop vineyards. It's where people grew like their own grapes or their own plants or their own crops, like the little stuff that they would use. And I'm convinced that Jesus, in talking to his boys and letting them know how he felt, in telling them some final words before he's about to leave them, he knows he's about to go get arrested and crucified. Gives them this picture. He says, I'm the vine, guys. And you're the branches. And if you'll remain in me, if you'll remain close to me, if you'll remain connected to me, if you'll have an intimate relationship with me, then you're going to produce much fruit. But apart from me, and I wonder if he broke a branch off. that had some grapes on it. Said, apart from me, you can do nothing. See, because for Jesus, intimacy was more important than performance. Like he wanted them to understand, because if you understand the disciples, and if you don't understand the disciples, go read the stories of the disciples. They were a messed up bunch of people. They make me laugh all the time. Jesus spent 3 years with them. They're going into the city. When they're coming into Jerusalem for this meal, they're like, hey, we want to stop by those people. And the people say no. And they're like, hey, can we just rain down fire on them so that God can punish them? And Jesus is like, you guys haven't got this yet. And then he's having a conversation with them, and they're arguing about, Jesus, like, in your kingdom, like, I know you're going to be first because you're Jesus, but, like, can we be second and third and fourth? And they're arguing about, like, their positional connection, not so that they can be close to him, but just so that they can have more power with him. And I feel like Jesus' response to that whole thing is, it's not about performance. It's about intimacy and connection with one another. Listen, this isn't just true with Jesus or like with a parent and a child. I mean, think about it. If you played sports and you have some sports memories that you really remember, I'm confident that you don't remember your batting average or how many games you guys won that year unless you were undefeated or completely defeated. But either way, I think what you remember from playing sports, at least what I remember, is the friendships that I made and the battles that we fought together. Some of the most crucial games that connected me to the people that I'm still in touch with were losses that were heartbreaking, but we fought it together. Or wins where we overcome what seemed insurmountable. In friendships, like true friendships, not like just like that annoying friend, but like true friendships. It's not about who calls each other more and initiates more conversations or who forgives each other first. It's about the fact that when the crap hits the fan, you know that's the person you can call because the last time the crap hit the fan, that was the person you called and they showed up. Because it's about connection more than it's about performance. In a marriage, it's not about who does more dishes or who makes more money. It's about how much time you spend together and the quality of that time spent together. One of our guys said it this way: proximity doesn't produce fruit. You can break off the branch and sit it right next to the tree, it still won't produce fruit. And he goes, that's like sitting in the living room next to my wife on Facebook while she's on Instagram. It's not producing connection, it's just proximity. See, but like intimacy has to be what drives us, not performance. Because I'm convinced of this, that if we focus on performance, if that's what we allow to drive us, that it puts us on a stage and a platform where we don't want to be. But here's the problem. I'll be real. When I lack intimacy, I just want to perform to make up for it. When I don't feel connected to God, I'm like, but God, let me show you all the things I'm doing for you. When I don't feel that connected to Kim, I'm like, Kim, let me show you all the things that I'm doing for you, all the sacrifices that I'm making. If her comment is, I don't feel close, I'm like, but what about the fact that I did the dishes? And she's like, I don't care about the fact that you did the dishes. I care about if we're close. I care if we can talk to one another. I care if I can be honest with you. I care if I can be vulnerable with you. I care if you're willing to be vulnerable with me. But the problem with performance is that it puts us on a platform. It leaves us living our life on a stage. And you go, Ryan, you have a stage up there and you stand there every week. It's real easy for me, church, to define what my stage is because this is it. It's physically a stage. But I want to ask you this morning, what's your stage? Not what stage of life are you in. What's the stage and the platform you find yourself living on? Is it your kids? And you've got to be the best mom out there and you've got to be better than all the other moms because if you don't perform well on that stage, then you don't have any value in this world, or at least in the world that you've created. Is your platform your social media? And it comes down to how many likes you have and how much engagement you get and how quick those likes happen and how quick somebody shares something. But if that doesn't happen, are you just not valuable anymore? Or is your platform social justice? And you've got to go fight some battle and you've got to go make some point and you've got to go drop the mic in somebody else's face. And if they don't get it or if they're not pissed, then it didn't matter. Or is your platform like the dance floor at the club? Where you go, I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to give it everything I have, and by the end of the night, I'll know if it was successful. See, because I heard a story, and this is a person from another church sharing this story, but they said, I lived my life in and out of the club, and the only definition of success was whether I had sex at the end of the night. I never felt intimacy, but I knew if I had performed well. And the most depressing part of their story, and I think it's very similar to us if we find ourselves living on platforms and stages instead of living with intimacy, is that they said there was a time where I danced well and I got what I expected. And I found myself sleeping on the couch afterwards because I never felt connected to the person I slept with. And the picture in my head of this person sleeping on a couch, covered up in a blanket, after having sex with a person that they don't really even know, that's heartbreaking. I'm convinced a life lived on the platform, driven by performance, just leads us to emptiness because it still leaves us lonely. If you choose to live your life on a platform, and it's all about how well you can perform, it's never going to get you what you actually desire. I don't think it'll ever lead to satisfaction. I'm more and more convinced, not just in my own life, but because of what Scripture tells us, that it never is going to lead to some sort of true satisfaction. But I'll be real, it's what I do. I lack intimacy, and I want to perform, and so I go pick up my trophy, and I'm like, but God, let me show you. Let me show you about this cool thing I did. God, I started a church for you. God, I sacrificed some time for you. God, I gave up some salary for you. God, I have a meeting and I have people over my house and I cook for them. Because I want them to know you more. God, I stand on a stage and I preach things, and I stand on a stage and I publicly repent, and God's like, yeah, but you never get in front of me and do it. And I don't know about you, but here's what happens in my life. What happens with me is I find myself with that trophy, still let down and frustrated with life, not only looking around at the people around me, but screaming at the heavens in my best Russell Crowe impression, are you not entertained? God, I did it all, and it doesn't leave me feeling any better. Where are you? And why aren't I more fulfilled? And I'm convinced that when we do that, the response we get from God isn't one of anger, because He's not mad at us when we yell. It's not one of disappointment because He's let down in us. I'm convinced that God responds with, you're asking the wrong question. I didn't create you for my own entertainment. And by the way, let me just hit the pause button. How sick would that be for parents to have children just so that they can be entertained by them? Hey, I had Noah so that he can dance for me when he's older. He's not some circus monkey. If I need that, go get a pet. And that's still weird. How twisted? Can you imagine if I said to you, I pulled you aside and was like, hey man, they're like, oh dude, your son's beautiful. Yeah, great. I hope he grows up and can do some really cool things around the house. I really am tired of mowing grass, so I had a son. man, like, heights scare me, and like, I need some roofing work done, so I'm hoping like 14 years from now, he's able to hop up on that roof, and then I can like it'll all be a success. You'd be like, what is wrong with my pastor? I think you'd be like, that's not my pastor anymore. That'd be weird and twisted. I think the same is true as if God created us for his entertainment. That would be just as messed up. But God didn't create us, and God's not after his entertainment. He's after our hearts. And we've got to learn to embrace that mentality. See, Kim and I in our parenting have some things. We both consistently pray for our son that God would help him to love Jesus and to love people. That's what we want. That's what we want to model. That's how we want to frame things. I'll be real. I don't care what my in-laws think of my parenting or what my parents think of my parenting. I don't care what you think of my parenting. I care if my kid loves Jesus and loves people. I don't care what society says. I don't care what other people want to say. I don't care if he performs well, gets good grades, or winds up in jail. I care if he loves Jesus and loves people. Because the definition of who my son is and the way that I feel about him is not driven by how he performs for me, because he's not performing for me. I want him to be close to me. And not just physically close, where we sit in the same room or we take some road trip, but we all have our iPods on and we listen to our own music. I mean, I want a child that can be close, that can be real, can have a conversation, can pour out his heart and know that I'm going to pour mine right back out. That's what I want. Kim was reading a book recently. It's a book called For the Love by Jen Hatmaker. I'd suggest it just because of how much she raves about it. I've never read it, so if you hate it, blame her. All right. But here's a phrase. She sent this to me, and she said, this is like my new motto for parenting. And so I just want to share it with you because I think it's relevant not only to parenting, but I think it's relevant to how we live life in view of who Jesus is and what he says about us. But it says this about our kids. If they don't love Jesus and people, it matters zero if they remain virgins and don't say the F word. We have to shepherd their hearts, not just their hemlines. And then the next paragraph goes on to say this: Jesus operates beyond the tiny boundaries of good behavior. Rather than simply enforce his rules, we've got to show our kids his kingdom. Because this is what I'm desperate for. This is what I'm praying for my son. That's where he'll discover a Savior worth falling in love with. My kid's probably going to cuss because both his parents do. My kid's probably going to have some mistakes and some issues and some things that he does that I don't like that much. He's probably going to annoy or harass your kids in kids ministry. He's probably going to think he owns this stage because he's my son. I'm okay with all that. And I'll work with him and I'll discipline him and I'll work on him. But not for your pleasure, for my intimacy with him and his intimacy with Jesus. That's it. That's the driving force behind everything. I think for way too long, and our culture promotes this mentality, but we let it seep into our church and we let it seep into our lives that somehow if we don't perform well, God's disappointed in us. And we let the parrot sit on our shoulder and tell us all the reasons we've screwed up and all the reasons we need to have shame and all the reasons we can't ever go where God's calling us to go. And that parrot just keeps yapping and we just keep listening, believing that it's the voice of Jesus. But what I need you to hear this morning is that the voice in your ear is saying anything besides you're my beloved child whom I love and I'm pleased with. That's not the voice of Jesus. There is somebody in Scripture that's described as the accuser, and it's like the prosecuting attorney who lets you know everything you've ever done wrong, who brings up every bit of character flaw that you might have, who points out every mistake and every bad decision and everything you've ever done that you ever regret, and that person is named Satan. And if you're following him, stop. I would never follow Satan, but you'll listen to his voice far more than you listen to Jesus. What voice are you hearing? Because the voice of God says, you're my child. And I love you. I'll be real. If you ever tried to tell my kid about all his flaws and all his mistakes and all his issues, we'd have issues. Because not only am I not going to speak those things over my child, I'm not going to allow anybody to speak those things over my child. But church, I'm convinced of this, that there's freedom on the other side of intimacy. But we've got to begin to embrace that. And you go, great, I want it. Ryan, you've convinced me, you've yelled enough, you did Russell Crowe, I want it. I want intimacy with God, but I don't know how to get there. You ready? I'm going to give you the key to intimacy. If you're taking notes, this is huge, you want to write this down. The key to intimacy is time spent together. That's it. What's the shortcut? Crisis. Go ahead and pray for that. God, desperately, I want this quick. Watch out. Stay away from me. You're straight up praying for crisis. You go, that's stupid. You're just making dumb jokes. No. I have some friends from Houston I met this week at a conference in Atlanta. You know what they said? They said, we've gotten closer to our neighbors than we've ever been before. We're more connected with our neighborhood than we've ever been before. Why is that? He goes, literally, because the guy at the top of the house is where we've all been living. Literally, it was knock, knock, knock. Can we live with you for a couple weeks? My house is flooded. And he goes, and some other people did that, and some other people did that, and some other people did that. And so we were all on top of each other. And so we started talking more and spending more time together. And we're more connected than we ever were. See, crisis is only the shortcut to intimacy because it just forces you to spend more time together quickly. It doesn't even change anything. And you go, but how do they spend more time together? Well, here's the other thing. Power's out. Wi-Fi's down. Internet's gone. So, screen time wasn't what drove them all staying in the same house. Conversations. Laughing together and crying together. Sharing with one another and eating with one another. That drove them towards intimacy with one another. So what's the magical shortcut? There isn't a magical shortcut. Intimacy is the result of time spent together. That's it. See, there's a person in our church who realized this principle in Scripture a long time ago, a couple years ago, and they had been driven so much by performance. And I actually walked up to them this morning. They were grabbing coffee, and I was having a conversation with them. Say, hey, I know you know I'm using your tattoo this morning, but I just want you to know I hate this morning's message. And it's not because I disagree with anything. I've said, no, I believe God's speaking through me. God's been speaking this to me for the past month and just wrecking my mentality about how I perform for him because he could care less. God's not concerned with how big our church is, and I'm not any more valuable to him if we open the doors tomorrow or shut the doors tomorrow. He loves me. He's not after his entertainment, he's after my heart. But I was like, man, Savannah, I don't like this message. It's uncomfortable for me. Because it wrecks how I've been living so much of my life for so long. And you know what she said? Me too. That's why I got it as a tattoo. It's been messing with me, and I've lived so much of life as if I'm living on some stage. And I needed to be reminded that God's after my heart. And so she got this tattoo on the back of her arm. And it's about this passage of vine and branches. And when she wrote me a letter about it that I don't have time to stand up here and read, she said, I realized that life wasn't about performing for God, but just abiding in who he is. Jesus wants me to be with him more than he wants me to do something for him. And so she got it as a reminder. And I want to challenge you. We need to start tattooing some things. I'm not saying go make some appointments at Concrete Jungle. That's not what I mean. We do that enough at Element. I mean, we got to start embracing some mentalities and building in some reminders so that we don't forget what God calls us to. Because how quickly do we forget that there's a better life out there and it comes from following Jesus? How quickly do we forget that life is better together? How quickly do we forget that growing people actually change? How quickly do we forget that we're contributors and not consumers? How quickly do we forget that we invite because we care, not because we're trying to be pushy? How quick is it, how easy is it to forget that this is a place we belong, even though we struggle to believe at times, even though we struggle to have it all together? Guys, this series, Inked, is all about things to remember. If you forget everything I've ever taught in 2 years, and if you want to know where we're headed in year 3, it's going to be this. Intimacy is far more important than performance. And we as a church have to begin operating out of the overflow of what God's teaching us and redeeming in us and doing in us personally. Because when we stand on the stage, we need to be able to put Him on display, but that's impossible if we're not close to Him. The best thing I believe I can do for you as a pastor is to model Jesus. And the best thing I can think you can do for your friends is to model Jesus. But let me just be real. It's impossible for you to model Jesus if you're not close to Him. You can model what your friends do, and they might be close to Jesus. But it is impossible for you to model Jesus if you're not close to Him. Now, I'm not trying to create a new performance-based mentality. That's around quiet time, and I got to do more, and I got to try more, and I got to pray harder. That's not the result. Listen to me. I think the reason many of us don't experience intimacy with God is because we've misdefined God, and nobody would want to be close to the God that we've defined. Nobody wants to be close to the God of the microscope that over-inspects everything you do and reminds you of everything you've ever done. We've got to redefine who God is. We've got to understand who He actually is, the way He sees us, and what He believes about us. And if we can get that, I'm convinced that we'll be desperate to know Him more. Because a love like that is life-giving. And as we live that out, I believe it not only gives us life, but it gives life to the people around us. So as we close this morning and as the band comes back up, we're going to do two different things. We're going to sing one more song about God's promises for us and what they mean. And listen, you might just need to not sing this morning. Not because you have a bad voice, because we don't care about performance, but you might need to not sing because you may be struggling to believe what we're about to speak. And maybe you just need to let it be sung over you instead of trying to sing it yourself this morning. But before we do that, we're going to take communion together. There's a couple guys who are going to be coming down your row. They have a stack of 2 cups. One is juice, fruit of the vine. Bad pastor's joke. We talk about the vine and the branches. But we're going to enjoy the fruit of the vine, but we're also going to take communion because it's the reminder of just how far Jesus was willing to go so that we could be connected with Him. I'm convinced that an element you can belong before you believe, because if you'll just get close to the vine, if you'll just be connected to the vine, if you'll just be around God's church, I believe He'll begin to produce the fruit through you. But I want you to think for a moment about a branch and what a branch thinks about. You go, I don't think a branch thinks. That's okay. If you were a branch, are you more worried about what you produce on one end or what you're connected to on the other end? Because I think the principle that Jesus is teaching us is if you'll worry about me, if you'll be focused on me, if you'll lean in to who I am, if you'll dwell on your roots, that I will produce the fruit. And I'm convinced the same is true in our relationship with Christ. That if we'll be connected to Him and we'll spend our time and our energy focused on who He is, that He will redeem us from the inside out. And so as we go towards year 3, I want to encourage you to be here. I want to invite you to be a part. I want to invite you to be connected, because we really believe here at Element that life is better together, and that the biggest catalyst for you knowing Jesus better is being around people who know Jesus well. And we're not perfect, and we're not always going to do it right, but here's what I'm going to tell you. As we move forward this year, we're desperately going to be pursuing Christ and allowing Him to speak and to move and to work through us. And I believe that not only is it going to change our lives, I believe it can change yours too. And so from me to you, not because I'm keeping tally marks of how many seats are filled or how many Sundays you're here, but simply because I want what's best for you. I want to encourage you to be connected here at Element. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you for who you are. I thank you for what you do. I thank you for the way that you love us and the way that you care about us. God, I thank you for the lengths you are willing to go to so that I could even experience what a relationship with you is like. God, I pray that this morning you would just attack and put on notice the performance mentalities that are in our lives. God, help us this morning to put some things on notice. Help us to put Satan on notice. That parrot needs to be strangled. Not quieted, not silenced. It needs to be killed. It needs to be gone, because the accuser is not what you say about us, but you call us your child. And so, God, help us to tap into something so natural for parents, a love that is much deeper than performance. God, help us to begin to tap into that this morning, to truly understand who you are and who we are in light of that. God, thank you for loving us. It's in your name I pray. Amen.